Let me tell you something the Stoics knew 2,000 years ago, and that most people only discover when it's already too late. Nothing goes unanswered. Absolutely nothing. Everything you do, every word you speak, every intention you carry, comes back to you. Not necessarily from the same person, not necessarily in the same form, not necessarily at the same moment, but it comes back. Always. Without exception. This is not mysticism. This is not religion. It's a law, the law of return. And it never fails. It has never failed in the history of humanity. And it never will. Think about this with me now. Have you ever done something good without expecting anything in return? And somehow, unexpectedly, life gave it back to you multiplied? Or have you ever seen someone act with malice, betrayal, or deceit, and you were sure they would get away with it, but time showed otherwise? That wasn't luck. That wasn't coincidence. That was the law operating in silence, as it always operates. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations something that will stick in your head after this video. The best revenge is not to be like the one who harmed you, because he knew the law would take care of the rest. And today you will understand exactly how this law works, why it is inevitable, and what to do to always have it working in your favor. Before anything else, I need you to understand something that will completely change the way you act in the world. The law of return is not a belief. It is not an empty promise that everything will be fine in the end. It is a principle that operates with the precision of a physical law, like gravity. You don't need to believe in gravity for it to work. It works regardless of your faith in it. And the law of return operates the same way. Regardless of whether you believe, regardless of whether you deserve it, regardless of whether you notice, it operates. Always. And the Stoics, through centuries of observing human nature, arrived at a conclusion that modern science took millennia to confirm. The universe is a system of balance, and everything that leaves you, every energy, every action, every intention, seeks balance, seeks return, seeks to complete the cycle. Marcus Aurelius was the most powerful man in the world, emperor of Rome, commander of legions, master of an empire that stretched across 3 continents, and with all that power, he could have done anything. He could have taken revenge on every traitor. He could have silenced every critic. He could have crushed every enemy. But he did none of that. Not because he was weak, but because he understood something that few leaders in history have grasped. Every action you take, whether of kindness or cruelty, shapes who you become. And who you become determines what life gives back to you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not over external events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He wasn't talking about resignation. He was talking about strategy, the most powerful strategy that exists. Control what leaves you because you know that what leaves you returns. Now let's talk about how this law really works. Because most people understand the law of return in a superficial way. They think it's simple. I did good, I receive good. I did bad, I receive bad. And although that is true, it is only the surface. The law operates in much deeper layers. The first layer is the most obvious. Your external actions, what you do in the world, create consequences in the world. You treat people with respect. People tend to treat you with respect. You act with dishonesty. Dishonesty tends to come back to you. That much most people understand. The second layer is more subtle and more powerful. Your actions shape your character, and your character determines what you attract. Every time you act with integrity, even when no one is watching, you strengthen an inner muscle. Every time you act with dishonesty, even in small things, you weaken that muscle. And over time, your character becomes the filter through which your entire life is experienced. A strong character attracts opportunities, people, and circumstances that resonate with it. A weak character, in the same way, attracts what resonates with it. This is not punishment. It is simply resonance. The third layer is the deepest of all, and it is the one the Stoics understood better than any other school of philosophy. Your intentions, not just your actions, carry weight. What you carry inside you, what you wish for others, what you quietly nurture, that also returns. Because intentions shape actions, and actions shape character, and character shapes destiny. Epictetus was a slave for much of his life. No freedom, no property, no rights. And yet, he became one of the freest men who ever lived. How? Because he understood something his masters never did. You can chain a man's body, but you cannot chain what he sends into the world through his actions and intentions. And what Epictetus sent into the world, through decades of slavery, was wisdom, integrity, and genuine teaching. And what did life give back to him? Freedom, not just the physical freedom that eventually came, but the inner freedom that was never taken away, and a legacy that has survived 2,000 years. While the names of his masters were forgotten, that is the law of return in its purest form, not as immediate reward, but as inevitable balance. Now I need to speak to you about the side of the law that no one likes to discuss, the negative return, because the law does not discriminate. It simply gives back. And if what you have been sending into the world, consciously or unconsciously, has been negative energy, envy, malice, deceit, then what is coming back to you is not coincidence. It is balance. How many people do you know who live in a constant cycle of problems? Who seem to always attract the same difficult situations? Who ask themselves why life is always so unfair to them? And if you look closely, not with judgment but with honesty, you will notice a pattern. What they send into the world is exactly what they receive in return, not as divine punishment, but as the natural consequence of who they are and what they carry. Seneca wrote something that will stay with you. Omnia aliena sunt, tempus tantum nostrum est. Everything is foreign to us. Only time is ours. And what you do with your time, the actions you choose, the intentions you nurture, the character you build, is the only thing that determines what the law gives back to you. But here is the part that matters most. The part that turns this knowledge from philosophical to practical. How do you consciously put the law of return in your favor? There are 4 practices the Stoics identified as fundamental. The first practice is to act with absolute integrity, especially when no one is watching. Because the law does not operate only on what is visible. It operates on what is real. And what is real is what you do when you have no audience. When you act with integrity in the dark, you are investing in something that time will reveal. No rush. No announcement, no need for immediate recognition, just the certainty that what you plant, at some point, you will harvest. The second practice is to eliminate envy completely. Not reduce, not control, eliminate. Because envy is one of the most destructive forms of energy that exists. It does not harm the one you envy. It harms you. It poisons what you send into the world, and what you send out poisoned comes back poisoned. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this with devastating clarity. When you wake up in the morning, think of the precious privilege of being alive, of breathing, of thinking, of enjoying, of loving. He practiced radical gratitude as a direct antidote to envy, because gratitude and envy cannot coexist. And gratitude, genuinely sent into the world, is one of the most powerful ways to activate the law of return positively. The third practice is to serve without expectation of immediate return. This is the one that tests human beings the most, because we are conditioned to expect immediate reciprocity. I gave, I want to receive. I helped, I want to be helped. I was loyal, I want loyalty back. And when the reciprocity doesn't come, from the same person at the same time, we conclude that the law has failed. But the law never fails. It simply operates on a timescale that our impatience cannot keep up with. You serve genuinely today, and the return may come from a completely unexpected direction, from a person you never imagined, at a moment when you needed it most. in a form you could never have planned, but it comes. It always comes. The fourth practice is the most challenging of all. To genuinely wish well. To those who have wronged you. Not pretend. Not perform. Genuinely wish. Because every time you carry resentment, every time you feed the desire to see someone suffer, you are poisoning what leaves you. And what leaves you poisoned comes back to you. The Stoics called this the premeditation of others' harm, and considered it one of the most self-sabotaging forms of existence. To release genuinely those who wronged you is not weakness. It is not absolving what they did. It is protecting what you send into the world. It is ensuring that the law works in your favor and not against you. Let me tell you about something Marcus Aurelius faced that will make all of this concrete. During his reign, Marcus Aurelius was betrayed by people close to him, underestimated by generals, criticized by philosophers, challenged by internal and external enemies. And in each of those moments, he had the power to react with the brutality the position allowed. But he chose differently. He wrote about each betrayal, each criticism, each injustice, not to harbor resentment, but to process, to understand, to respond with wisdom instead of reacting with emotion. And what happened? The empire survived. The traitors were forgotten. The critics were forgotten. And Marcus Aurelius, 2,000 years later, is still studied, quoted, and admired by people all over the world. The law did not fail him. It simply operated on its own time, as it always does. Before closing, I need to ask you a direct question. What have you been sending into the world? Not what you say you send, not what you believe you send, what you really, honestly, have been sending through your actions, your intentions, your character, because that, and only that, is what the law will give back to you. There is no shortcut. There is no exception. There is no person powerful enough to escape the law. All those who tried, history has shown us, and all those who worked with it, history immortalized them. You choose which side of that story you want to be on, and that choice begins now. With the next action you take, the next word you speak, the next intention you nurture. The law is always operating. The question is it operating in your favor?